This 117th Congress, the American people chose an evenly split Senate.
It gives me great pride to serve as Speaker of the most diverse House of Representatives in the history of our country.
Hello, welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Leigh Ann Caldwell, anchor here at Washington Post Live and co-author of the Early 202 newsletter. Joining us today is the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, New York Democrat Gregory Meeks. Congressman Meeks, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And to our audience, please feel free to join in this conversation by tweeting at us at Post Live, and we will try to get some of your questions answered. Mr. Chairman, I want to start with the big news of the day, and that is, what happened last night is the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago, President Donald Trump's records that he has there. What is your response to this? Is this like what the Republicans are saying, government overreach?
No, I think that we've all said. I mean, the Republicans have done investigations. Remember Hillary Clinton for months and months, and with nothing to show for it. But we know that no one politically was involved in this, that there had to be various approvals from a grand jury and from a judge. So we've always said no one is above the law, no matter the president of the United States. So apparently they're generally, as a lawyer, they would have to have probable cause for a judge to sign a warrant to do something of this nature. So I think that what has to be done is the judicial process, or the criminal justice process, is just moving along. But there obviously had to be probable cause for a warrant to be granted.
Right. And I want to ask you about the reason we asked you on this show is about your trip to Taiwan with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi last week. And the reaction that it's gotten. So tell me first, when you were in Taiwan, what did you hear from the Taiwanese? Were they concerned about your visit, especially given China's threats and escalation before and since then?
Not at all. They were so happy for us to be there. They thanked us. You know, there was over 250,000 people in Taiwan that was tracking our flight into Taiwan. When we landed, the greetings were just fantastic. The streets were lined with individuals as we left the airport going to our hotel. One of the largest buildings, skyscrapers, were saying, "We love you, Nancy Pelosi. Thank you for being here." Around our hotel, people in the streets with signs welcoming us. So they were, the people of Taiwan was very appreciative that was there. When we met with the president and members of their legislative body, they were all very thankful and said, "Thank you for being here." It was a warm reception, no regrets. They were very happy that we were there. So there is no question. I mean, we all know about China's aggression, but the people of Taiwan wanted to know that their friends are with them, and they demonstrated just that by the reception that they gave us.
Some people have expressed concern since then, including the Australian Prime Minister. Some diplomats have said that this perhaps could escalate tensions with China, increase the chances perhaps of even war. What is your reaction to that? Is that your assessment of what could happen?
Now, look, I've traveled to Taiwan previously. There's been other members that have traveled to Taiwan. There's nothing that we did was different. You know, it's the status. We wanted the status quo. Members have traveled. Other speakers have traveled to Taiwan. So there's nothing that was done on the United States part. The only one that wanted to change the status is Beijing. The only one that's talking about aggression even before we arrived was Beijing. There was nothing that we did. So the clear answer here is, I think that China, and can be predicted, wanted to intimidate. This is something that they were planning and would continue to do off and on. But when our friends or threatened as that is, as Taiwan has been, that's when you need your friends to be with you. And so we knew what was going on in that regards, and so we want our friends to know that we're there. We're not going to desert them. And I will say to you that the other countries that we visit in the region, Malaysia, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, they were happy we were there, and we stopped in Taiwan also.
So do you think then that China's actions and words are just efforts to intimidate and not threats that they might follow through on?
Well, look, there's some things that I can't discuss. We've had a lot of classified meetings with our folks on the way there and before leaving. But I will say that I don't think that China, other than having talk and doing the test, in which I will say, some unprecedented flying missiles over Taiwan, going close to the Japanese territorial waters, which is why Japan was happy that we were there. But I think that those threatening moves by them is an attempt to intimidate. And the Taiwanese surely would not be, and we're not intimidated, as you might have heard recently from their foreign affairs minister. And surely our delegation and the Speaker Pelosi is not intimidated by Beijing and President Xi.
Did the Biden administration try to dissuade you from making that stop? What did they say to you?
Well, President Biden is very aware, being a former senator, of the difference between the legislative bodies and the executive. So therefore, he knew that we had a responsibility and that we should do what we thought was right. And I'm appreciative to President Biden in the sense that, the authorization and the protections that were needed, et cetera. It was all, we made sure that the trip was a safe trip. So he did not say to me, Nancy Pelosi, anyone, because he knew that we had a responsibility to do it. And he also realized and said that he supported us, and did support us during and after the trip. So, no, I think President Biden did the responsible things, and he's been very involved as a former chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee himself, and he knows that it is important to show that we stand with our friends and our allies.
How would you assess the overall relationship between China and the United States right now?
Well, it's very tense at the moment. There's no question about that. It's tense on the Taiwanese Strait, and as a result, we've got things that we still need to talk about and work together on, like climate. We've got to, make sure that we're doing those things. We've got to make sure the conversation continues. Now, I've visited China on several times. I've always and will continue to have dialogue and conversations with its ambassador when they come to visit with me and they knocked on the door, as they did just before we left on this trip. So we need to have these conversations with them, and we'll continue to have these conversations with them. But there's no question that it's clearly a tense moment on the Taiwanese Strait, and that's why I also think that it was very important for us to be there and to stress that what we want is the status quo. We're not trying to change anything. We're not promoting anything other than that. We just want the status quo there, and China should know to do that. They should not force to change things. So that's where we are, But we've got things that we've got to work on, and we disagree on trying to change the status of Taiwan.
Mm-hmm. I have a question from a viewer. Randall Marks from Maryland asks, former President Trump was very aggressive, would you favor putting a U.S. naval base in Taiwan? If not, how do you deter Chinese aggression?
Look, we've always agreed that we would give the Taiwanese the defensive weapons that they need to protect themselves. And, in my committee, for example, there's several bills that we are putting in place and provisions that we have signed into law, like we want the Taiwan Peace and Stability Act, which has happened, the Taiwanese Reassurance Act, and provisions to expedite getting them the different equipment that they may need to defend themselves. So we will stand by. I don't think that we need to do anything. Taiwan, when we spoke with the President Lee, that they're ready to defend themselves and will defend themselves. They're not intimidated by China at all. So we will continue to do those things that we've done all along to make sure that we are cooperating with Taiwan in the face of Beijing's aggression.
I want to move on a little bit to another trip you just took. You just were in Colombia because for the swearing in of Gustavo Petro, who is the new president there, an avowed leftist. Why did you attend that inauguration?
Well, I was there with Administrator Samantha Power as the official congressional delegation. Colombia has a 200-year history with the United States of America. They are probably the most important country to us on the hemisphere. We've got great close working relationships. And here we have democracy at work. A president that was elected by by the people of Colombia in a clean, transparent election. Democracy is what we talk about all the time. And there's plenty of areas of which we will continue to work with them in most areas, just about all of them we talked about, and listening to his inauguration speech. And for me personally, one who has been invested in Colombia for over 22 years, watching the progress that they've made, having had a relationship with every president since I've been a member of Congress, starting with President Uribe to President Santos to President Duque, now to President Petro. It is important. And the focus that he has on trying to make sure that violence is ended in Colombia, that both violence from the guerrilla groups and violence from narco traffickers, there's things that we can do collective, new ideas that he may have and ideas that we're working on. So there's, and the conversation that we had with him, which was, I think, very good conversation, and will continue. So it was extremely important for us to be there, to let them know that for the United States of America, we want to continue the relationship that we've had for over 200 years.
But are there any concerns that there's more and more countries in South America that is electing far left leaders? You have Colombia now, Peru, Venezuela, of course. Is that going to be a problem?
But listen, I don't think that the people who speak are the kind of government that they want. Did you hear the same questions when there were far right presidents elected? The people have a voice,
yeah,
and they try to move forward in that regard. So I see my thing is democracy. That's what we talk about. We don't want someone that's going to come in and be, because right now it's a struggle between democracy and autocratic governments. So the people's voice was heard. And as long as that occurs, whether it's someone to the left or someone to the right, did we, a lot of folks in America, we elected a right-wing president 6 years ago. Then there's another election. In fact, the president we had still doesn't acknowledge that he lost, even after all the votes were counted. That's the kind of person you don't want, because they're not following the democratic process. Having people like the Hungary president, Orbán, who came in, who clearly is undemocratic. Those are the people that we want to call out, not to work with, those that don't believe in democracy. But here in Colombia, you had an example of a clear-cut, clean election with the voice of the people. So you got to acknowledge the voice of the people and work together because we're promoting democracy.
There's some concern that with the leftward movement of some of these governments, that there could be a spike in attempts to immigrate to the United States from South Americans. Is that a concern that the United States should have? And is there a plan in case that does happen?
Look, I don't think so. What I think is what people who are running to migrate to the United States are people generally that's under authoritarian governments, not democratic governments. And they're under situations where there's crime, there's murder, there's killing, there's homicides, there's no peace. So they're running for someplace better. They don't want to leave. They don't want to leave their homeland. They're forced to leave. And in instances like Colombia, where clearly, the areas where people have been killed and moved around as those of African descent on the Pacific coast. And what we talked about moving forward is to make sure that they're included in the peace process. And our great Samantha Power, who is with us from the USAID, going into those areas, working with the Colombian government to try to make sure that we can reduce the violence that's there. The number one part of the inauguration speech that President Petros was talking about was ending the violence, stopping the wars, trying to figure out how do we make investments in communities that have been left behind, trying to work together with climate, because the climate and people coming in has been the ones that hurt them. So the way that we do that is to work collectively with the governments. To me, we had this great plan. This is what happened with me when I was and how I got involved in Colombia. We started with Plan Colombia. And when you looked at the big cities, whether it was Cartagena, or Bogota, or Medellin, they weren't safe. They were being run by narco traffickers. And the United States and Colombia came together to figure out for the municipal cities how they could take them back and make sure that people were safe. When I first went there, you couldn't go certain places because of fear of kidnapping. So they worked and they successfully, now you go to Cartagena or Bogota or Medellin and other places, there's tourism back. What was left out was the farmlands, the agricultural lands, the Pacific coast, where the indigenous and African Colombians were. So half the plan for peace in Colombia was done. So now you got to do the second half. And that's what President Petros was talking about, to make sure that those that have been left out are included. And talking to those people and in talking with, working with the United States, the same kind of formula that we worked out for Plan Colombia, we should work together for peace in Colombia, particularly on the Pacific coast, with the indigenous and African Colombians live.
On Sunday is going to be the 10th anniversary that Washington Post freelance journalist Austin Tice has been held captive in Syria. Is the United States doing enough to ensure his freedom and to ensure that he remains alive?
You never do enough until you get home. You keep trying. You keep working. I know our committee, we work in a bipartisan way there. I work with Mike McCall on sending letters. We just sent 2 letters from the committee to the administration and to others. We want all of our prisoners that are being held to be released so that they can come home. And so, are we doing enough? You're never doing enough until they come home. You keep working at it. And I think that the administration is focused on that, as we see that's taking place with Russia, also with 2 of our 2 folks that's being held hostage. We have others in Venezuela. So we've got work to do, and I will never be satisfied until each and every one comes back home to their families.
Chairman Meeks, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today and very timely discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for watching. You can find the transcripts of this program, watch this program, and watch other programs on WashingtonPostLive.com. Thanks so much.